All right, welcome everybody to the meeting. Um, I'm your host, Hudson, and thank you so much, Tim, for running it last time. Um, did a great job. And let's see, have the agenda open, and let's go ahead and review the previous decisions and um, then the roadmap. First of all, one more thing. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. And y'all can hear me on the Zoom call, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so the decisions made from last time were to stop the ProgPow carbon vote. Oh, actually, that was made from 58. So anything from 58, we're going to skip. Um, it looks like the actions required. Work in progress for cat herders updating EIP 1. Um, the smaller hard fork versus larger hard forks to be discussed in the Berlin meeting, which is an agenda item. Um, Vitalik to format the currently proposed EIP 1559 EIP. Vitalik, did you happen to format that?
It, yeah, it got done by the people he's working with.
Awesome. Okay, that is that Eric Vitalik?
Right.
Oh, I hear some static on your end, Vitalik. Okay.
So
Um.
Hudson, I can comment on this,
Oh,
Hudson, if you want.
wonderful.
So we have actually formed a working group for that AIP. Well, not just for this AIP, but basically for just making it implemented. So I've announced it, I think,
Oh,
yesterday or the day
perfect.
before.
And yep, that's we're gonna
So
get to that on the agenda too.
yeah, sure, yeah.
Perfect. Um. All right, action item, discuss if ProgPow should continue to be implemented if the technical audit is not funded and the Ethereum magicians are here. The ProgPow audit is going to be funded, meaning like everyone's confirmed their funding. It should be starting this week, or next week, hopefully. And when I say that, I mean just there's some logistics to work out, meaning people have to sign some paperwork and the funds have to be sent. So the down payment is going to be the DAI that has been collected from the fundraising on Gitcoin. So ProgPow will also be talked about in the Berlin meetup, so I'm looking forward to hearing about that. Um, let's see, for roadmap, we're going to be discussing that today too. Um, EIPs, working group updates, please add more EIPs to 1344. That's fine. And then the working group updates, which we'll get to. Um, Parity Ethereum added quick consensus for full support for Goerli testnet in the beta. And then TurboGeth to do updates on TurboGeth, which we will have today if that wasn't already done last time. Okay, so we've gone through previous decisions. Now for roadmap, if you click the link, it's going to go to the Ethereum wiki. Um, that roadmap part is actually a separate item. I just realized that I should have. Um, let's see, that would be. Oh, actually, no, sorry. Dano, you had something on to gauge opinions on post Istanbul fork timing. If you had a link to anything, or if you wanted to discuss that today, you can go ahead.
So the link is in an Ethereum Magicians link where I put up a schedule. So during the ETH Berlin meetup, we had a little room poll of what we thought an appropriate cadence would be after Istanbul for subsequent hard forks. Most of the room supported 6-month hard forks. There was a few people in the room that supported 4-month hard forks. So in that Ethereum Magicians post, I put together a little chart of what the timing would look like if we did 6-month versus 4-month hard forks. And I think we should focus on 6 months because if we do 4 months hard forks, we're going to get an overlap. 1 month, we're going to release stuff on the test net. The next month, we're going to consider what's in the EIPs for the next one before we deploy to mainnet. And then we deploy to mainnet. And then the next month after that, client implementations are done. So the risk that I see there is if something goes poorly with the previous hard fork and client developers need to spend time making adjustments to that previous network upgrade, they're going to lose time implementing the EIPs for the next upgrade. So that would wind up being a full skip if necessary to the next hard fork, another 4-month delay. But if we get 6 months, we don't even consider the EIPs for the next hard fork until the previous hard fork is complete. And I think that helps the train model of having these scheduled ahead of time to know when the next one is coming. So when we have these last call for EAPs for a network upgrade, that if you know when the next one's coming and you know your stuff is not ready, it's easier for you to be honest and say, look, we're not ready. This isn't going to be fine. But we have another train coming in 6 months. So we'll just hop on that train. And I have a feeling that will improve the quality of the EAPs and the implementations that we have coming into these network upgrades.
Are there any comments about that from anybody?
Yes, so I'm just going to sort of repeat what I also commented on what Dano said on his, well, he basically pretty much read out what he put it on Magicians, and I responded to him that this overlap that you're talking about between the like test net of the previous fork and EIPs of the next fork is only a risk if you're assuming that it's always the same people who do the preparation for the hard fork and actually developing EIPs. However, if these people are different, and this is actually the model that I would like to see, like where that's why we're spawning all these work groups. We come to this later. That in this model there is no problem of overlapping because we are having basically multiple people working on this. It's not like everything is bottlenecked on the like a very small group of people. So yeah, that was my comment. We'll see. Maybe we should just see whether we can kind of see how first one goes and like whether we can get enough work done to be able to push it to squeeze it further. But I would like us to actually at least try to create this overlap and see if it works.
I think we should start with 6 months at least once before we go to a 4 month, because I mean, before we've been working, 9 to 16 month hard fork cadences. So even 6 might be a stretch. But as far as overlap, if things go well and the test net deploys just fine, you're right. It's not the same group of people. But if things go poorly and we need to debug why we're getting consensus issues on the test net, typically it is going to be the developers deeply involved in debugging the consensus issues. They're going to be the same ones responsible for implementing. So that's where the overlap risk comes from.
Okay, that's interesting. I like the idea of 6-month ones. Anybody else?
Just briefly to say the timing out loud to get it into the notes. So April 2020 would be the next one if it's 6 months. Again, I pasted the link into the Zoom chat here if you want to have a look. So realistically, this means if there is another core devs meeting in July, that would be exactly 9 months until the next hard fork. So I'm in support of picking up our pace. We just need more people and some more support for tuning process so that we can get better at it. So I don't think anyone's against Alexi's point of going faster. We just have to practice.
Yeah, I mean, if this first one goes fine, we could totally try for the B hard fork, try and go for it. And these names that I put on that chart, they're just cheesy placeholder names. I'm not saying that these should be the names, but we need some name to discuss it with. And we probably shouldn't formally name these until we open up the hard fork anyway. So these are just placeholders.
Okay. Yeah, and we can refer to them by the month and year. Or, I mean, obviously, I like referring to them by cheese whenever we're talking about them for now. Um, so, okay, anybody else have comments? Okay, thanks for that. It's good to put it on everybody's mind, and please comment on the Magician's Forum if you haven't already, if you have an opinion on that. And July is probably when we should start discussing this again, I think. Unless, do you want to discuss it earlier, Dano?
Unless people object to the 6-month timing, I don't think we need to revisit this until July when we're ready to start gathering requirements for the next hard fork.
Okay. Sounds good. We might revisit this in June just to refresh everyone's memory. Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
I think we should add a hard fork kickoff to the calendar as well. Hard fork kickoff at 9 months, EIPs at 5 months. So there's 4 months to gather requirements and gather finality before we go for the implementations. That's probably something I should add to the schedule.
okay. So for EIPs, refer to roadmap link for list. That's going to be right now, it's the Ethereum wiki under roadmap/Istanbul. And um, we have 1679 as the hard fork tracking meta EIP for now. And let me go to that. Okay, that just has some timelines and some rough stuff. So let's start with the first one. Since it's getting close to May, I want to put priority on us figuring out which proposals are going to be going in or not. Um, if we can figure out today which one of these are popular or which ones we can approve for going in, we can add it to our list of actual ones we're going to implement. So EIP 1829 precompile for elliptic curve linear combinations. This also is something that Casey is talking about later in the call. Um, and this actually, let's first kind of figure out what people's feelings are for precompiles, because historically, what's happened is we had a different timeline for EWASM before, or something like that. And now, since things are more up in the air, it might be good to put precompiles in a way that's a little bit better and not wait for EWASM. Let's see. Who has comments on this precompile for elliptic curves? Because I
Yeah,
don't think
so
Remco's
I have a
here.
comment.
Yep.
Yeah, we talked about this one 2 weeks ago, and I made a comment on the discussion on the forum at Magicians that the specification as it's written, it doesn't even have the gas cost specification. Uh, so, I mean, it's not, as far as I see it, this EP is not ready. It's not a specification of what should be implemented. So it's kind of hard to discuss it in the context of should we include it in the hard fork.
Okay. And
I
go
have
ahead,
another
Lexi.
comment on this. Yeah, so basically, yeah, that's what Martin said is just completely true. And the reason for this, and obviously the people who are trying to make this happen, because I talked to Alex Vlasov yesterday about it, because basically I suggested him to create a working group on this to actually complete all the work that is necessary for this EIP to be ready. And because basically it is a lot of work, and as people might remember back from Byzantium, and it's not trivial. So it needs all the gas thing, and so that's why I suggested to Alex to formalize this as a working group, and then actually now it's going to be the list of whatever 6 that I put on the comments that are existing. So as the output of that working group, we should see the properly done EIP. Whether it will be proposed by May or not, or later, I don't know. But as I said in Berlin, and I don't want to be fixated on this particular date, because if the EIP is well specified and properly prepared, then the implementation can go much faster, and especially if the test array is also generated for it.
And question from Vitalik, because it sounds like his audio isn't working. Does the precompile for generic EC support 512-bit moduli or just 256?
I think we'll have to put this question into the working group. So I can't answer it right now, but let's write it down.
I'll add it to the ETAT girders PM issue.
Right.
Vitalik, I'll tag you in GitHub on the issue.
Thank you, Boris.
I think another question so Martin, I think the question more is, are you against this as a concept if the code is good and the EAP is well specified?
No, I'm not against it as a concept, not at all. But I'm not a cryptographer, and for me, this is kind of I have a hard time to decide if it's worth it or not. So it would be good for the people who champions this to explain to us non-cryptographers why this is so great and why it's so useful, and motivate. But I'm not like theoretically against it.
Okay, great. Alexei, who's the lead on this?
Yeah, so I'm going to probably publish this announcement today because I didn't want to do like multiple work groups per day. But the leader will be Alexander Vlasov, and I will put his details on wherever we're gathering it. And obviously, if this is the working group, and then especially if it's actually also at least partially funded, then you could expect this kind of accountability of people answering providing all the materials and stuff like that. So yeah, it's Alexander Vlasov, who is de facto is already working on the implementation, has been working on this implementation for quite a while.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a comment about not this particular precompile, but precompiles in general.
Sure, go right
You
ahead.
can hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can hear you great.
Yeah. So historically, there's been one case of a precompile that turned out not to be needed. So even if the code is good and the EIP is well specified, that's not enough justification for adding a precompile. So just one example, the elliptic curve multiplication on BN 128, it was added as a precompile, and because it was assumed that implementing an EVM wouldn't be performant enough. And what happened was somebody came along, Zachary Williamson from Aztec, and did an implementation in EVM that is actually cheaper in gas cost for just one point, it's almost the same, and then for 2 points or more, it's cheaper than the precompile. Now it is true that the elliptic curve multiplication could be repriced, so there'd still be an advantage. But Blake 2, so the proposal for a precompile for Blake 2B is one that I'm skeptical, because there is an implementation in Solidity with a lot of inline assembly, and the gas cost is cheap enough to do up to some number of input bytes, and I think it's up to the champion to demonstrate that. For one, the use case they want, the implementation in EVM is not sufficient for the sizes that they need to hash, and also that they've done a best effort, to optimize the EVM implementation. Because even the Blake 2B, there's opportunities to optimize that. So anyway.
Oh, yeah, so yeah, thank you, Casey. I just wanted to say that it's probably most probably the Blake 2B is out of scope for the working group I mentioned, and the reason being is that they basically chose to work on this specific precompile, which is generic elliptic curve support. And so otherwise, because basically you can't just leave the IPs and then nobody is working on it, there's no use. But if somebody actually committed to work on this specific precompile, then I think it's warranting the group. Wherever you cannot really force them to work on other precompiles, because if you find people who are happy to work on the others, then yeah, it's fine. But at the moment, I should ask, but I think they only mean the elliptic curve precompiles.
Yeah, actually, Zuko Wilcox and some of the Zcash people want to champion Blake 2B, since it's an older EIP and the person who originally proposed it is busy with college, so he can't champion it anymore. Um, so what we'll do is I'll talk to Zuko. That'll be on my list of to-do items and see. Obviously, this won't go into Blake 2B wouldn't go into Istanbul, but just kind of give them an update that there are precompiles now being considered to go in.
It could go into Istanbul if someone works on it. That's our process.
Yeah, it could, but oh, okay, it's not May yet. Never mind. Yeah, it absolutely could.
Yeah, so essentially, if somebody is prepared to work on this, then anything can happen. But if there's nobody to work on it, obviously it's not going to happen.
Yeah. So I'll check with them and let everyone know next meeting. Let's see. What is the next one? And I'll try to go through these a little more quickly so we don't use up all the time on this since we have a few other items. EIP 615, static jumps and subroutines. That is, let me open that one. That's from Greg, Brooklyn, Paul, and Christian. It looks like. Was this discussed last time, and what was the verdict? I wasn't able to read all the notes.
Yeah, we discussed it a bit. I don't think any verdict was reached.
Brooke, did you have something?
Yeah, we talked about it a fair bit at the meeting in Berlin. There's a few people who have concerns about specifically complexity, number of opcodes, and there's been some suggestions to break a few of them out into separate pieces. But for the most part, we're still hoping to get this in for the hard fork, but there's just a bit of community wrangling first.
Okay. So does this need to be something that is tabled for the next meeting for decision making?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So moving on from that, we'll have that as an action item to discuss next time. Next one is ProgPow. Oh boy. Oh, I love this one. So yeah, we had previously decided to put it in, and now I think there was a working group in Berlin about it. If anyone wants to go over that.
So I did do a talk on it. The big takeaway is testnet will need to be deployed. That is a new one. Gongam won't work what's proposed. So whether we put it on Ropsten or whether we do its own testnet. And since we got the Mueller report coming out about the findings of does it meet its claim for the audits, I don't know that we can put it in unconditionally at this point. If we were to put it in, we need to put a star on it. Depends on the finding of the special committee of the audit to make sure that it meets its claims, and then we'll probably have another discussion when that audit actually comes out. Yes, you're going to say something?
The bad news
Yeah.
is it's the audit might not come out till July.
Right. So if it doesn't come out till July, and that's kind of the deadline for client implementation, I do think clients probably should implement it. Whether it's part of the hard fork is a separate question. And we can do a test net that is just ProgPow, possibly to replace Ropsten, because Ropsten is getting quite old, quite large, with a lot of strange,
So
a lot of strange branches around some of the hard forks. Go ahead.
yeah, so what is the need for a new testnet? Is it just to update to 093 or something else?
It's updated to 093, and none of the clients that have been implemented yet can do both 092 and 093, and I don't know if we want to encourage that. So it would need to be pretty much from start.
Yeah, just one implementation.
Right. So we also wouldn't want to launch that testnet until after the audit comes out. And if it's a ProgPow only testnet, it can be launched independent from a mainnet commitment. So if major clients had it, we can launch a testnet for it, whether or not it makes it in Istanbul on an Istanbul timeframe, and we can digest what the outcome of the audit report is on that regard.
I would recommend that we don't do a pure ProgPow testnet, because we have an ETH to ProgPow transition that is closer model of what will actually happen on mainnet, and that's, in my opinion, the intent of the testnet switch over.
So that's what Gongam did initially. They switched over at block 30,000. So I guess what I'm saying, ProgPow only testnet. The purpose is to test ProgPow. When we start on eTash for a while and make sure that we have a controlled transition so we can gauge what it looks like when the hash rate transitions over to ProgPow, see if it really does stabilize in 3 to 6 hours like the estimates are.
Okay. So the other question I have is, wait, it was on the tip of my tongue. Oh, if we do the Ropsten, if we do Ropsten and we do ProgPow on there, and then we decide not to put it in like late July, early August, and just take it out of the hard fork, could we then revert back to ET hash, or is that kind of one of those hard things to do?
That's one of those hard things to do, which is why I proposed a separate test net where we start ProgPow on, because I think you're right. The intent is right that if we do it on Ropsten, it's tantamount to a mainnet commitment, because we've never done an ETH on a test net and then reverted the ETH, except in Constantinople, which took a second hard fork. So that's why I think not putting on Ropsten until it's truly mainnet committed is the appropriate approach.
Any other comments? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So normally for a consensus change, that would be a concern. But when we're changing the proof of work, we could actually switch, because if you first try to fast sync to a head, and the first thing you do is verify that head, and the proof of work fails, then you're obviously going to search for the right head instead. So we're not going to wind up in the situation that you fast sync to the wrong tip and have to go back and forth. Fast sync would still work even if we revert back to the former split. I don't know if I'm making sense here.
Well, I think that would involve extra work on the primary clients when it comes to switching to a proof of work, because no real testnet has really done a solid proof of work shift, and they don't have the support for that in their Genesis files to go to one for a period, and then go to a second for a period, and then go back to the first for a period after that. So that's my concern, is if we do it with that in mind, we're putting extra work on the clients.
Right. Yeah, I thought you meant if we roll back. Yeah, right. You're right. We couldn't switch to ProgPow then switch back to ETH. But what we could do is switch to ProgPow and then say, hey, screw this. Let's continue where we left off, ETH.
Hudson,
Yes.
can you just read in Vitalik's
Yes.
comment?
I was just about to do that. Well, wait. Sorry, I have to scroll up to get the whole thing. Vitalik's instinct is that doing another St. Petersburg-style backwards hard fork on testnet is too much extra work. It's a bit tricky, and because ProgPow is 2 times harder per hash, if he's asking if that's correct. I think that's what y'all just talked about, right?
Right. The measures are about half to 40% to 50% of what ETash is.
And then if so, a transition is vulnerable to a 33% attack unless there's a checkpoint, because the attacker can mine higher diff historical blocks. Higher difficulty, I'm guessing.
Right. That's why I think it should be, we discussed a couple of these at ETH Berlin, a couple of strategies. We could apply a multiplier to each new different hash algorithm. Just say each hash gets a 2x to apply the difficulty, but the difficulty is not consistent enough, and or do a one-time adjustment to reduce the impact of the time frame. But it gets messy to do a multiplier, so it would really need to be a switch at one point to ProgPow and never look back is really the safest approach. So going back and forth really doesn't help.
Okay. Well, we don't have to decide that portion today. It's more if we want ProgPow to go forward at all into the next hard fork. So, is there anyone in this call who is going to voice opposition to including hard POW in the next hard fork? And the reason I ask that is I haven't heard any core dev opposition that's been loud, and I might have missed it, but I haven't heard any core dev opposition that's been loud. And the opposition I've heard from the public, in my opinion, was that they weren't filled in on this. They think it might be a waste of time, or they want to wait for the audit to come out, is what I've been hearing mostly. So is anybody heavily opposed?
I think the audit needs to come back mostly positive for it to go into Istanbul. And if the audit doesn't come back in time or comes back in any way negative, we need to reassess for Sagio.
Okay. I think that's a good strategy. Anybody else have comments on that?
I still,
Oh, Dano, could you mute real quick? Okay, great. What was the comment?
I still don't know how this became contingent on an audit. I thought we decided to do this back in January, but I'm not going to go there.
Okay. So, looks like that one is official for the next hard fork as of right now, and that's more. It depends on your perspective. It's either a reiteration that it's going forward and it's no longer just a proposal, or you can say that it's a new decision. Whatever y'all want to, whoever's listening to this, you can decide for yourself.
Hudson, just
Yes.
a point of process. So we've got the EAP 233 changes merged in. So the wiki is still a decent overview right now, but ideally someone will have to champion ProgPow and actually PR it into the hard fork meta.
Got it. Okay, you're
Right.
right. That is the next step.
So technically this would now be moved into accepted and be listed in that category.
Okay.
I can do that later today or next week, and I'll put the conditions on it that I think it should be brought in on.
Great.
Thanks, Dano. All right, next. Adding precompiles for ED25519. This would be helpful for the Ethereum name service. I think Virgil's on the call. Virgil, if you want to really quick explain how this would be beneficial and anything else you want to add real quick. Oh, actually, you know what? He might not have microphone. Oh, the linear elliptic curve works, so there's no need.
Yeah. No, it's fine. The linear elliptic curve is a superset of the previous one. But basically, in short, it allows you to interact with TLS certificates and DNSX zone signing. Probably the most obvious thing it would allow you to do. So you know how you can get identity, like the HTTPS extended validation certificate. Like when you go to PayPal.com, it says like PayPal Inc. in the address bar. We could be able to verify those kinds of identities on Ethereum, and that'd be kind of neat.
Question for Virgil.
Sure.
So if 1829 is implemented, does this mean that 665 would no longer be needed?
Correct.
So which one would you prefer?
I mean, the elliptic curve is a superset, so like, why not have more?
Okay. I guess the one thing to put into consideration, especially if ENS wants to champion this, is that the other one, I think as we explained earlier, doesn't even have gas estimations, and therefore, unless it's worked on pretty hard, in the next month or so, may not be eligible for Istanbul, and then you'd have to wait till potentially April for the next hard fork. So I don't know how soon you all wanted this in at all, or am I doing that? Am I estimating that right?
I guess either way. I mean, I guess I think we'd be happy with as long as it eventually gets in there. I guess we don't care which one.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. I think we can move on then, and we'll just make note that as long as either the superset or that one is worked on, will make ENS happy, and they are the use case that we're keeping into consideration for this. Anybody else have comments on that one? Okay. Add a chain ID opcode. That one is in last call currently. And the review ends in 4 days, and then we will reapproach it. I don't think that is necessary for the hard fork, right?
It's the first one to follow the new hard fork process, and it's in 1679.
Okay, I guess I'm saying the change to the actual code. I didn't think that this requires a hard fork, or does it?
What? Yes, it does.
It does? Oh, okay. I'm thinking of something else
It's a
then.
new opcode or a precompiled tract.
Oh, it's a new opcode. Oh, sorry, misread that. Okay. So that's in last call, so we'll just go forward with that through the new hard fork process. Um, Draft are in progress. Should we go over the draft in
Yeah,
progress?
actually, 1884 is no longer a draft. It's merged or whatever.
Oh, cool. Well, wait. It still says. Oh, I'm on
Yeah,
an
so
old link,
founder
I
stuff
think.
is ridiculous.
Okay. Cool. So that one doesn't have any heavy opposition according to last week's call then.
Not that I've heard.
Okay. We can say that one's going forward then, I'd say. Vitalik, is your mic fixed by chance? Because you were the main one who wanted to talk about the fee market change. And if not, we can do that next time. Okay. And also, we can get Eric Econar in here next time as well to kind of be another voice in this. I think he'd be happy to join the call. Vitalik, did you want to talk over text just a little bit about this? Or does anyone have questions over it? I think people might need to look at it more before questions are asked, but does anyone have any? Okay. Oh, there was a presentation in Berlin about it, so that means there's a video associated, right, Boris?
Yeah. Time codes are all in the overview page. Let me go find it.
Great. Thank you. Okay. The Blake 2B F compression function precompile is being worked on by Virgil. Oh, and Vitalik, by the way, recommends reading the EIP itself. And there's threads on Magicians and A3 Research where he's responding to concerns about it. So, and then the link to um, the meeting timestamp or the timestamp for the discussion and the video has just been posted by Boris. Oh no, never mind. That's Casey.
Oh yeah, and then so also he mentioned that I wanted to make an amendment to the EIP 1559, which we talked about in Berlin. I can just give you a few words about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not like decided or anything like this. It's just something I throw in after listening to Vitalik's presentation. So you might remember that Vitalik's EIP is mostly about introducing the kind of two components of the transaction fees. One component is called min fee or base fee in different sources, and another one is a premium fee. And essentially these are the components of the gas price that that the transaction center pays for a transaction. And so the one component gets destroyed or burned, and the other component gets collected by the miner. And so the first component is base fee or min fee is actually some sort of is regulated by some kind of feedback control in the protocol, or in Vitalik's version, I think it might be controlled by the miners as well. But essentially, people, their theory goes that this would lead to more stable and predictable prices, gas prices. So I suggested the amendment, which I think would help roll it out quicker, which is basically not trying to modify the meaning of the existing fields and the transactions, which I think the original EIP does, and instead introducing a new transaction type, which will have a proper format for what Vitalik proposes for these different parameters. And so the way we do it is that we essentially create two sort of virtual spaces inside the block. One of them is for all transactions, which we could limit to, let's say, 8 million, like a hard limit of 8 million. And then we open up a little bit more space for the new format. And so we allow both formats to coexist. And then eventually might decide to shut down an old format or do something else. So the benefits of that would be that we could roll out this change quicker because we don't need to coordinate with every wallet provider, because if they didn't make the change, they can still use the old format, everything should work. But also, the second benefit is that if the theory is in some ways flawed or parameters are incorrect, and the new format becomes actually more expensive for the users, it doesn't actually ruin the network because there is a safety net of the old format. And then, but if it is successful, then we essentially looking at the real data, we see when we can start deprecating and retiring the old format. So there are some concerns about my amendments, but yeah, that was it.
Okay. And Vitalik had just another comment. No need for 2 explicit arrays, just 2 running gas used counters. Anybody else have comments on this one? Okay. I'm going to put on my to-do list to invite Ikonar, and we'll see that Vitalik gets his mic fixed by next meeting. Next up, we have... The page is lost by Vitalik. He has to catch a plane. Where's my page on this? I think we had one more. Yes. Oh, this is being actively changed because I think Alex added some stuff. So, what's the next one we should talk about? Oh, EIP 1352. If you're on the Ethereum wiki page for this, just refresh the page, and you'll see the updates. Alex, do you want to just go through all of the ones you just mentioned? They seem pretty non-controversial for the most part. Oh, and you're muted if you're trying to talk.
Yes, sure. I actually left a comment on the PM issue, which has a few more proposals. Let me just, all right, so I guess I'm gonna start with 1352, specify restricted address range for precompiles and system contracts. This has been, I think, proposed even for Constantinople, but it was too late at that point. It doesn't really change anything on its own. It should have no effect. But in the future, if some other EIPs are proposed which would deal with precompiles, then it can have an effect. So an example for that is EIP 1109. Which proposes to, well, an earlier incarnation of 1109 proposes to reduce the cost of static call when the destination is a precompile. And having 1352 would simplify the specification of such a change, because one could just refer to the restricted address range. Any call made to the restricted address range has like a lower fee. Does that make any sense?
Any comments?
I know that the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance are going to want to support this because they want some address ranges to be set aside so that they can use them for basically custom sidechain precompiles. So I think it's a good EAP and needs people to look at it and workshop it. And it doesn't seem that complicated.
Martin, did you have anything?
No.
Oh, okay. I saw you unmute for a second, so I was just checking. Okay, if you want to go to the next one, Alex.
Okay, the next one is 689, which was added by Yoichi close to 2 years ago. Address collision of contract address causes exceptional halt. So this was overlooked for quite a while, and I think, so basically it tries to clarify the case when somehow contract creation would end up with the very same hash, which is unrealistic on mainnet conditions. But he wanted to clarify this to make testing easier and more simple. Yeah, I don't think anyone looked into this lately, but I think it might be useful if it's a small enough change.
We would need a new champion for that, since Yoichi's no longer participating in the EIP process anymore, is my understanding. We could check on that, though.
Hold on. Isn't this already the case?
The case what?
I think with Create 2, the case may have changed.
I think Vitalik proposed this like 2 years ago, and we accepted it, or something to this effect, back when he wanted the original Create 2.
So what Yoichi is referring to is EIP 86 account abstraction. If that would be activated, then his change would not be relevant anymore, but EIP 86 wasn't activated.
Right. But I do think we have a clause about contract collisions against empty. That is implemented in the clients, which make contract creation fail. I'm 95% certain. I can look it up.
I think we have some test cases that target some parts of it. I think what is needed to confirm it's fully specified, and it's not only specified by test conventions. So you have any spec we can refer to. So I would say we need to do a bit of research on this. But I think it's good. It's on the table, so we can solve it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I cannot volunteer to champion it. I just wanted to highlight the EIP, so maybe somebody will be interested in it.
Okay. Boris, should an EIP with no real champion go into proposals at all?
I mean, the nice thing is that I think the one tweak, so Alex and I talked about this a bit, and I think there's a little bit more tweaking to be done to 233. Alex mentioned as a wrap up from Berlin that we really should have an EAP champion, just meaning it doesn't have to be the author, but someone that puts up their hand and says, I'm going to work on doing the work that's needed to get this in. So the simple thing is, because you have to do a PR to the hard fork, if no one does that hard fork, it's not actually proposed, so it won't get done. So the wiki is an in-between. Ideally, by next core devs call, all of those, anyone that's serious about championing something will have PR'd into the hard fork meta, or they won't, and then we can actually refer to the hard fork meta as the canonical list of how things are moving along.
Okay. Thank you. Were there any other ones from Alex?
Yeah, I have at least one more I wanted to briefly mention. It is listed in the draft in progress section on the wiki. It's 1803, rename opcodes for clarity. So that's, again, not really core because that's only something relevant to languages and tools. But basically, I want to clarify some of the opcode names to match their behavior more closely. I think probably three I would like to highlight. I think 2.5 years ago, there was a proposal to rename the SHA-3 opcode to Keccak 256. This since has been done, I think, pretty much everywhere, at least in the languages, but it hasn't been, say, reflected code officially. So this proposes that the, say, code official name of the opcode is Keccak 256. Another example is renaming invalid to abort, because in practice, that's what the opcode has been used to be doing. And I've seen a confusion when people try to refer to it and they say the invalid opcode, but then a lot of other opcodes are also invalid. So this isn't really core again, but I think it's useful. And the last one is, well, there are a couple of more in the IP, but the last one I would like to highlight is renaming balance to xbalance to be in line with Xcode size, Xcode copy, Xcode hash, because that's the only opcode which doesn't have the ext or external prefix, yet it accepts a address as first parameter. Now, this is the only change which could also have some relevance to another EIP proposed for Istanbul. The one proposed by Martin, what's the 1884? Because 1884 has an option to introduce a new opcode for self-balance.
Actually, I updated it, so it's not an option. It's earlier on the 1884 was two variants, but then I changed it to being only one variant, which has the opcode.
All right, anyone have comments on that?
No, but I did find that in the old EIP 1014, there's a clarification which specifies that the behavior of collisions is already specified by EIP 684. So I think we could, I mean, Alex, you could look into it and perhaps close the old one from UHG 689. I don't think it's relevant.
Yeah, let's discuss this offline, I guess, on the channel.
Okay, sounds good.
So as regard to this renaming opcodes, I'm not sure what's the best place to discuss it.
Opening up an Ethmagician's forum, probably.
I guess the only the only relevance it has to core stuff is if you change these names, then EIPs should refer to opcodes not only by the mnemonic but also by the actual opcode value to avoid any confusion.
I would say, Alex, if this is not the, if this is not the code change at all, right? It's just the matter of basically like how things are named in documentation and tooling and clients, whatever. And I guess we could just easily, if there's no objections, we can just easily kind of ratify this, and then from now on, people would start working on renaming things if it makes sense. I guess we don't have to really have too much of the discussion about it because it doesn't really touch the code, does it?
No, no, it's not anything related to hard fork. But including it in, say, Istanbul, I guess, ratifies the changes. That's the only connection.
What I'm saying is that it could be basically ratified even way before Istanbul, even like today or tomorrow. Just like we're just do communication from now on. We should be renaming this opcodes to this opcode, and this is how this should be done everywhere. And I guess that's probably going to be enough, no?
Yeah, I think Alexi's point stands. In general, a lot of the discussions in Berlin were, let's parallelize a bunch of stuff if it's not dependent on each other, and this is one of those categories. So please work on it, and then come back to core devs when you have an update that says it's ready to go, and let's practice non-hard fork approvals.
Isn't this
Yeah,
just a yellow
I think
paper?
it's ready.
What was that, Greg?
Sorry, Greg.
This is a yellow paper PR.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that because we already have an EIP for renaming suicide to self-destruct. So this would be on the same note.
Okay. Okay.
Any other comments? Okay, and I think you had one more about unlimited swap and dupe instructions, right, Alex?
Yeah, I can very briefly just explain that that would introduce at least 2 new opcodes to be able to access the entire stack. And it could also be useful for EIP 615 to be used for the get local, set local. I guess there's a potential to do that, but that EIP right now is still in draft. We had some discussions in the Solidity team regarding to it, and it may need some updates before it's proposed in a final form.
Okay, I think that's the last one there, and I believe that completes our list for EIPs. Is there any that I missed?
Just point of order again, if you are going to champion one of these EAPs, please do a PR into 1679 to add it to the proposed section, and we'll practice that over the next couple of weeks, and I'll make sure that the wiki ends up being synced with 1679, but 1679 should be considered the canonical place.
Okay, wonderful. The next one is item 5, a proposal of a formal process of selection of EIPs for hard forks. This was brought up by Pooja, and Pooja, if you want to go through and just quickly explain the reasoning behind this and what this is.
Yeah, before we go ahead, I would like to mention one more thing. One more EIP was proposed by, I guess, Lane, 1890. Here I have posted the link. So the process I wanted to introduce here is like right now what we are doing, if we want to propose anything, we are adding it to agenda or maybe to the acquisition forum or at different places. What we are saying that if you need some EIPs to be proposed, please make a PR, not PR, please raise an issue at ECH GitHub, and it will be picked up and then will be listed and then will be discussed as you did today. So that was my basic proposal about EIP 1929, and I find that it is a little bit different from the current EIP 233, which was the question again and again why we cannot be like merging it together. We can merge it together, but I feel that it is better to have it as a separate EIP because the purpose of EIP 233 is to create it explains how to create a meta EIP for any upcoming hard fork. And the target audience for that may be the for this, like we are doing it for Istanbul. Boris is championing, not championing, champion is not the word, but he's leading it. He's doing a lot of work with the Berlin meetup and everything. He's trying to kind of organize it. So he is there, and the target audience for this EIP 233 would be the one who would be helping out with the meta EIP for Istanbul is 1679, and the and other authors or champions who want to introduce their EIPs for this hard fork or for the upcoming hard fork need not go by the EIP 233. They are good by going by EIP 1679, which is already there. So what I was trying to convey here is if we have separate small pieces of everything, then we can actually edit or append it as per need. The flexibility part is there. So if we agree that we should have a process defined for doing things like this is very small thing for this Ethereum blockchain, but that this is a small bit can add a lot of value. If we define a process how we are going every time, then nobody has to be there every time to guide things. We will just pick up one EIP and do that thing. So that was my basic idea, and I would like to hear from all of you, if it is good to collect the EIP from there and then go ahead with the process. If it is approved, right now we have come up with some EIPs that have been approved. Yes, we are going with that. Then they would be PR'd into EIP 1679, and then they would be taking ahead.
Okay.
Well, yeah, so I just want to comment. So it's a very good thought, though I would say that we are currently changing things quite a lot. We actually basically changing a lot in the process of how we do changes. And I keep pointing out to everybody that EIP by themselves are basically not really doing much. It's the people who are doing the work. So essentially, like, I would start from the work, then go to the IPs. And so because basically putting the IPs there and approving them doesn't actually get things done. So I would say that I'm not going to worry too much about the specific process for collecting IPs. I think we're going to have enough structure around it for now. So, and also it's just the first kind of hard fork where we're trying to do this meta IP. So I guess we probably have enough rules for now for these kind of things, because otherwise I'm already almost confused about what we're going to do with the IPs.
I am definitely.
Yeah, I understand that for this particular upcoming hard fork, we have almost done with the EIPs that has to be proposed. But still, the acceptance date is not passed yet. We can probably use it for the rest of the EIPs which people would want to present or want to be included. I'm just asking you guys to give it a dry run. If this works out from going forward, we may not have to add it to every agenda that we want to do it. We may not have to go to the Mathematician Forum. If somebody wants to do that, we have to just make an issue, create an issue, mention it over there, and in that from that it can be taken over by the person who is actually looking after the hard fork thing, like coordinating thing. So he knows the place from where he has to pick up the EIP, and the new EIP authors also knows where to just write it down, just create an issue, and he will be guided from there onwards.
Well, it's not like we have like 10,000 people we're trying to create the IPs, to be honest, or to try to work on the changes. At the moment, we have the opposite problem, that we don't really have a lot of people who taking on the work. So I would say that it's a good idea, but we probably getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here. So, and I would probably park it for, let's come back to this. I mean, that's my personal opinion. Let's come back to this idea a bit later, because I think it's a good idea, but probably a bit early for where we are.
I can see your point, Alexi, where I really like this idea. I commented in the Magician's thread that this should definitely happen, but I can see your point where if it happens too early, there would be a little too much confusion putting in that process at this point when there's a dozen other processes being updated at the same time, including looking into updating EIP1 in its entirety. Or not its entirety necessarily, but with major parts of it potentially. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, where I really like the idea, but I also hear the concerns of putting it in too early. Any other comments, Pooja?
Yeah, I would just like to make another note of that. I mean, like when it was initially proposed, one of the APA champion tried to implement that, and he found it very helpful. So I was just looking forward to hear more of the EAP proposers, what they think about it. And if I mean, I was just proposing it to make it a dry run if it goes by, because we have 15 more days, over 15 more days to do it. And if it goes by that, it's fine. If not, then we'll take it from the next hard fork. From like July, we discussed that we have to start preparing for it, so we can take it further in July.
Yeah, and I don't think you really need approval from this body necessarily. You can just kind of announce that you're wanting to use this as an added thing to keep a list of current EIPs active and kind of help take the burden off people who are updating the wiki potentially, with people who are actually proposing the EIPs keeping up with the updates. So I think that the people who want to try that can try it, and there's no harm in that.
Sure, thank you.
Great. So anyone who wants to participate in that, just look at Pooja's link that was posted or talk to her, and we'll go from there. So that was number 5. Let's have, I think, Boris and Alexei go over the recent Berlin meetings. We've been talking about them throughout agenda items 1 through 5, or 1 through 4, when it comes to EIPs and stuff, but I believe there were more working groups, so we can kind of combine 6 and 7, and that'll cover pretty much the rest of the meeting, because number 9 Casey's already talked about. But you know what, just so that we don't cut off anything else, Casey, was there something else you wanted to add when it came to the single cross-platform library for precompiles, or is that been kind of talked about enough already?
Yeah, it was discussed in the comments, but I don't see a response from somebody who can speak on behalf of Parity. So it would be good to hear a Parity maintainer's opinion on the question.
Great. Yeah, I don't think they're on the call this time. I think Fred's doing something, but the next time they're on here, we can get their opinion. Or if we want to just ask in the core dev chat, that might be better.
I'll do a tracking issue for this.
Okay, thanks, Boris. Okay, so now that we've done number 9, let's go over the Berlin meetings and the working groups and the potential new working groups and anything else Boris and Alexei and others want to talk about. So we'll start with Boris and then move on to Alexei for some of the technical stuff.
Yeah, very brief, not going to take a bunch of time because the links are all in the notes. And I'll paste some of them into the chat here. 2 days seem to be quite good. We just sent out email wrap up to everyone that attended, and that's publicly listed with a wrap up link on the ETH Magicians forum as well. Proposing to potentially meet again in July, so look for that on ETH Magicians. And basically feedback: is it valuable? Do we want to do more like these? Especially if we think about an April 2020 hard fork, that in fact might be kind of both prepping for Istanbul and thinking about next hard fork. Other than that, I think Alexei, or King of Working Groups, as I like to call him, should talk more.
All right, King, go right ahead.
No, I'm not the king. So, but I will go over my favorite subject currently, which is the working groups, and I've listed it for the convenience of people who want to look at the agenda. I've posted the update, which I'm kind of going to be reading out. So there is a website which is the in.ethereum.wiki/eth1, where we currently have 6 working groups listed, and you might notice that we used to track like 4 working groups before. We decided collectively, I guess, to currently drop their tracking for 2 working groups. We can always resume them, but I've listed the reasons why we want to stop tracking those 2. For example, the chain pruning. It's been proposed back in the DevCon 4, but there hasn't been a lot of activity, and actually we would like to reconnect with the Swarm team next month to see if we can reform it but with the people from Swarm team, because there are some people think that there should be some kind of collaboration there. And secondly, with the simulation group, as we had a presentation from Vanessa at Stanford and Zach, you did a great presentation at Berlin. And however, at least to me, it's not currently clear how we're going to proceed. And we could reinvigorate this group if we, after some certain discussions and clarification. So the two groups that were there before are still there, the State, Rent, and EWASM. And then recently we've added another 4 groups, and actually I'm going to add this another one. So the Finality Gadget Working Group is I've done a short presentation at Berlin, is essentially hooking up the Beacon chain, which hopefully will launch end of this year. It's going to hook it up to the Ethereum clients, Ethereum 1.0 clients, and create essentially finality. And from my preliminary estimates, the finality would have a range of basically 1 hour, around 1 hour. So every 1 hour you would basically see a final block, hopefully. And then there's another working group is, we talked about it, generalized precompile for elliptic curve arithmetics and pairing. So essentially there has been a lot of work done, and this is just formalizing this work. And I haven't wrote an announcement yet, but de facto it's already active and pretty much active. And actually I got the response about the Vitalik's question about Vitalik was asking whether it's going to support 256-bit arithmetics only or further. Actually, this is very general. It will support 512-bit arithmetics and so on. So it will actually, they already have prototypes for BLS signatures as well. So yeah, so basically the website which is linked has a lead on it. Then we added the EVM evolution group, which wasn't announced yet, but it's de facto active by looking at what the work they've already done in researching. I guess we will need to define a bit more what exactly they're going to do in Istanbul. But yes, so since it's been active, so I put it there. And the fee market change group has been basically created like yesterday, and the lead is Rick Dudley. And this is to implement, to research and implement Vitalik's proposal. So yeah, so that's the idea essentially for working groups, as I keep saying, is that it's basically a group of people or one person, and then later more people coming around who are interested in implementing something, taking it to the end, well, taking it all the way to hard forks, basically being responsible for that and accountable for that as well, if we pay them. Basically what my point is that if we pay them, if or whoever we are, like foundation or something. So the good thing about funding those things is because you actually can keep them accountable and then just ask for results, because otherwise if they do it by themselves, I mean, you can't really do that. You can't really keep them accountable. So and so the working groups produce EIPs, they generate the tests, and they do all the work necessary to make this happen. And so the other working group that I want to propose, and we just had a quick chat with Dmitry before this call, is essentially Dmitry wants everybody, all the client implementers to do some RPC calls. And so far the adoption was very, very slow. And so we ideally need some sort of consensus test working group whose job will be to make sure that these calls, these RPC calls, are implemented pretty much everywhere. I don't know how exactly we're going to do it, but I think we should just get on with it, find people who want to do it and just do it. And that's going to be the group number 7. And that would allow people more easily to generate the consensus tests themselves, fill them, and then hopefully also the more people will use them, the more optimized they will become. People will have a greater attention, and we come up with better standards and so on. And that was basically my update on the working groups. So that's my main thing. That's it.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments, or anyone from the working groups have any comments?
Yeah, hey, this is Zach. So I had been doing some work on simulation stuff. I didn't present much of it in Berlin, but we've aggregated a significant amount of data. We haven't had a lot of time. There have been some coordination issues. But what I wanted to recommend was combining the simulation efforts with like the testing working group, because that would streamline things. And there may not be enough work or enough people, because right now it seems like I'm the only one that's actually doing anything, and I don't really have a lot of time. So it might streamline efforts to combine that with like a testing working group.
Yeah, that's basically what I would expect to happen. So my kind of, as we working through this, so I realize it's very important for the group to, so if for the group to be successful, there has to be a certain level of commitment, obviously, from the leader and from the members. And so if we want to make it a proper group, we probably have to find a leader who can dedicate at least half of their time to this, or ideally the full time. So, but let's talk about this. I think I'm glad that we come back to this, and then let's discuss this. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I've put a lot of time into it. Obviously, like not full time, and I'm willing to do more there. But also, I think that some of the simulation efforts will overlap with testing as well. And me and Dimitri had a meeting a couple days ago talking about testing and forming a working group. So I'll let him fill in on that as well, probably with testing updates.
Okay, cool.
I think one of the things that came up, and it actually came up with the fee market change that Vitalik proposed when he gave his presentation, was that, and Alexei kind of talked about it a little bit. Alexei has some funding for the Ethereum Foundation to do work on these items, and that's the kind of elephant in the room, is that if we expect these working groups to essentially do research on ETH1X and work on implementation, or in areas like infrastructure, like testing, then there needs to be money, just to say the word out loud rather than resources or something like that, to support the serious commitment of time to these things. A lot of us have been volunteering time and are happy to do that as part of a large open source project, but there's a certain level of commitment where that has to be compensated. So that's obviously an ongoing discussion.
If you'd like, I can kind of be a liaison for discussing with the Ethereum Foundation potential funding request and things like that, and kind of be like a conduit for communication there. So yeah, just Boris, talk to me about that later. Zach, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna say also, like, keep in mind, like, at least speaking on my behalf, is, I work at Whiteblock full time, and we're a for-profit company, so I wouldn't think that it would be entirely necessary to seek a large amount of funding. All I would really need is essentially a junior developer that can kind of take direction from me, and that would be a cost that I would also be willing to cover on behalf of Whiteblock, because I could write that off as R&D. So we can be pretty efficient and optimal with some of these efforts, and at least on my behalf.
Cool. That sounds great. Any other comments? Okay. That's a really good overview. Thanks, everyone. Next up on the agenda would be, we already talked about the ProgPow audit update. Audit's funded, the audit is funded. So testing updates would be next. I don't think Dimitri's on the call. Did anyone else have testing updates? Zach went over the fact that he's having meetings with Dimitri, but did anyone else have like specific updates?
Martin, do you need help with Hive tests, or are you going to coordinate with Dimitri and Zach?
Yeah, I'm mainly working with Frank Sands-Large to implement some sync tests and some peer-to-peer tests for clients. I've been in touch with Zach. I'm not really sure what collaboration there will be. They're kind of building this generalized version of Hive. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's it for testing updates then. Um, I was just going to ask, is there a good way to time box items? Is there like a method or process that I haven't read about before for time boxing that anyone has a recommendation for, or even just an original idea? And that would be during these calls, by the way. Whoever's leading them, make sure that we have enough time. We did really good about time today, but in the future, if there's more items, we might need to time box.
I think
You just need to be more assertive.
All right, more of a hard ass. I got it. Boris?
just saying that I just got my update in like late last night Pacific time, and so if we can just get some of the things in earlier, or even have discussion ahead of time, who knows how we can do that, but that can maybe just help have a cadence where the discussion happens and we just have questions on the call rather than having to go read it and then discuss on the call. So that's just improving our process.
Okay. Good feedback. I think that's those are both good ideas. Does anyone have any more? All right, cool. Any client updates? I didn't see any specific ones in the comments that anyone wanted to talk about as far as I can tell.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry. No, I just wanted to. I realized I forgot that I did the little comment on TurboGet. We say basically I'm just keep using it for the stateless client prototype, and so if somebody hasn't seen my latest publication about this shades of statefulness, essentially, you could look it up, and I'm going to try to write more accessible version of it. But essentially, I'm coming to the idea of making the flexible trade-off between the statefulness and statelessness. So essentially to have the clients who can dynamically shapeshift between being stateless and stateful, which is quite interesting. So yeah, that's it.
And then Matthew, I believe the last name is Halpern, said, I can't attend the meeting, or I'll be listening to the meeting but can't speak. And it looks like ETH version 64 was presented at the 1.x meeting without much commentary. After touching base and getting updates on the sync progress, I think it's best to wait until these mature before locking anything in. He's going to aim to get EIP drafts out before the next core dev call and continue to track the sync progress over that. And that is that's the networking protocol, right?
Yes, correct. So I can comment on this because I've been talking to Matt about it as well. And so, yes, there is a certain overlap between the proposal for the ETH64, which would be the next version of the Ethereum, what do you call it? I mean, I don't know the correct term, but this network, kind of one of the network layers protocols. And, and Andre was also presenting at the Berlin workshop the first sort of spec for the Red Queen Sync protocol, which is, for example, introduces red request IDs in every operative, and so the same thing happens in ETH64, which is actually kind of an obvious improvement because it has lots of performance implications. So yeah, but I think it makes sense to get it sorted, get specification in to make sure that we have correct overlap between those things. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have comments? All right. I think we finished up 3 minutes early, unless there's EWASM or research updates. But I saw Danny left, and actually, yeah, I said only if they're posted in the comments below in the agenda. So, anybody else have any other things to say?
If I could just bring one thing up, in terms of funding as well, issues, I just want to take a minute to drop this. So we're also funding some initiatives through Moloch DAO. So I would encourage people to make some sort of proposal because we are looking at different avenues of funding for these initiatives.
Great. Alex?
I just wanted to ask for clarification on the hard fork meta. Boris mentioned earlier on the call that the wiki shouldn't be if I got it correctly, the wiki shouldn't be the main source of information, rather the hard fork meta should be the canonical source for these discussions, which EIPs are proposed. And as of today, on the meta itself, it's Afri and me listed as the authors. So that means we are the ones who can click approve for the EIP auto merger. So I just wanted to clarify, is that what we agreed, that anything can be proposed and I'm just going to click yes if it's pointing to a proper EIP?
I would just say yes. Why not?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Lots of things will die at the proposed stage. I think one more tweak that we should make is that this concept of a champion should be listed there as well. So the only one that's in there right now is Bryant with 1344, the chain ID opcode. And maybe if no one objects, Alex, I'm happy to essentially help manage that for you, since Afri's no longer involved, if we want to make that change.
Yeah, what did you mean by the champion? Do you have like have it listed on the hard fork meta, or have it listed in the EIP itself?
The hard fork meta.
Yeah, I think that might be a good idea. So at least people know who to contact for questions. Yeah, we can also take this discussion offline. One last thing I wanted to mention in regards to that. I've created a topic on the Magicians Forum for the hard fork meta and added it as the discussions to URL in it. I haven't found any other topic which is specifically for this, but it may be a good place to discuss which EIPs people propose to be included, and it might be a good forum to have discussions only for the proposed EIPs and maybe the transitions when transitions are decided on.
Okay, that sounds good. All right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Happy Friday.